Consolidations. You had your share in Maine.
We did.
The bulk of the work has been done here. Bishop Kimmick went from 275 worship sites down to 197. There may be more in the offing.
There may well be. He has hinted at that too. He told me I'll have some decisions to make, but I'm here too early to know any kind of the details of that.
How difficult is that, knowing the history of these parishes and how close some of these parishioners are?
Well, it's a very, very painful experience for the parishioners and for the bishop. When we closed parishes up in Maine, and I think we merged a whole lot of parishes, and that went well, but we actually closed 10 or 11 parishes, not as many as here. And I celebrated the closing Mass at almost every single one of those parishes. And very emotional. You saw tears in people's eyes. You saw not only current parishioners, but old people coming back for this. But in every single case, as I stood at the church door after the liturgy, wondering, what am I going to hear? Not once did I hear anger. In every case, there was sadness and loss. And in every case, they said, Bishop, thank you for being with us tonight. I don't think I can ask any more than that. We had no protests in Maine. Parishioners sometimes will protest to the Vatican. We had none of those. Boston had a load of them, and we've had a little bit of it here. But we were graced.
Buffalonians speak their minds.
So do Mainers, trust me. Absolutely. Read my mail.
The changing laws on health care, coverage when it comes to contraceptives, for example. Will you issue any directives to Buffalo area Catholic institutions?
Well, we'll have to look at all of that. Right now, it would be premature to say that I would be ready to issue directives. If I decide after looking hard at the issues and consultation to issue them, I would do that, but not before I sat down with the people involved in administration and put everything out on the table and see what the options are. Yeah, but I will be, when it comes to issues of the defense of church teaching and church values, you will notice I will not be shy.
A wide range of institutions, religious, athletic, educational, have had to deal with people in trusted positions who have violated that trust by abusing children.
Yes.
There's been a move toward disclosure of the identities of those who are credibly accused. Now, you came under some criticism by one watchdog group, SNAP,
Yeah.
for keeping secret, they allege, the identity of 7 accused priests in Maine. What was your response to that? And how will you address issues like that here in Buffalo?
I would preface my response by saying that, and you may know this, that American dioceses have to be audited annually for what we're doing to keep environments safe, to deal properly with allegations and all of that. And we have had 5 or 6 perfectly clean audits in a row, which means that our record in Maine is very, very clear and positive. In fact, we've been commended for the way we do it. SNAP looked into something that we had published, as a matter of fact, to get that information, because they like to make a statement anytime a bishop's appointed. And I don't remember all the details, but a couple of those priests they were talking about were dead. One of them was a person against whom there was an allegation, but the alleger never named the one. There were things like that. There were reasons why. In Maine, whenever there's an allegation, it is taken seriously, and I'm going to continue that here. When we would do an initial investigation, if we found what the church calls a semblance of truth, which is not, which just doesn't mean it is absolute proof, but if there's a semblance of truth to the allegation, then we make that public in Maine. And we make it clear that this is not a judgment on guilt or innocence, but that the man's being removed from his position, temporarily at least, so that the course of justice and the investigation can proceed. And we have a very, very good record on doing that. Now, there are some critics who will never be satisfied, but that we have been doing.
In one case, you did reverse yourself regarding a priest who harbored a known sex offender, and I guess you got a lot of feedback. We talked about that once before.
Yeah, that was an unusual
and
case.
it was a lesson in a sense for you.
It was a lesson. It was a lesson. This was a priest. There was not an accusation, you know, that came out that he personally, that priest had, you know, had done nothing to a child. That was not the issue at that time. But that some fellow whom the priest knew to be an abuser came to him for a place to stay, and he allowed him to stay there. And he would tell you, this priest would tell you, and I think he means it from his heart, that he was trying to be Christ-like to this person and give him a place to be. Well, it was a very bad judgment. It was imprudent. Was someone always in that rectory when that guy was staying there to supervise him? You know, those kinds of things. So we took him off the job because of that, even though he had not been convicted of an offense himself, because it was a very, very bad thing to do. But then people were saying to me, we got loads of mail from people who loved and respected this priest. They said he's not been accused of sexual abuse himself, you know, in this public forum here. But I said his presence in public ministry is going to be very, very upsetting to people. But then I was convinced that I didn't have the grounds canonically not to give him some limited ministry. So we tried that, and there was an uproar. So I could see people were even members of my own diocesan staff, do you know, who, for example, people who worked in our chancery in Portland, who were not my immediate staff, but other secretaries and people around the building said, Bishop, this is a bad thing. So because of that, I learned that I have to pay more attention to the possible consequences. Those were unintended consequences. I thought by giving this guy, who was not himself accused of abuse in that setting, some quiet ministry to do to keep his priesthood. He loves being a priest, to keep his priesthood going. But I made it clear to him that he made a very stupid, potentially harmful decision. We don't have any indication that when that abuser was living in that rectory, that children were abused in that situation. We investigated that, but it could have happened.
What kind of relationship will you have with the press? You said when you came here at the airport that you want to keep the lines open.
I do.
What do you see as the role of the press and your relationship with the press?
Well, I think the role of the press, obviously, is to tell the truth and to keep the people informed about what they need to know. I've dealt a lot with the press, especially in Maine. I was available to the press. And I learned that I have to deal with all of the media. I also learned to be very candid over time up in Maine, and I don't know you folks yet, that there are some members of the media I learned I could trust more than others to tell a straight, fair story without spin. And to tell the truth, you know, and if the truth is grim, you got to tell it. But in a fair way, you know, with both sides of the picture and all that kind of thing. So I will be present to you folks.
How about interfaith relations in Buffalo? This is a very diverse city.
Which I love.
How will you handle that? Will you approach other religious leaders from other faiths?
Absolutely. It's too bad you can't be at the installation, because you will, at the installation of a new bishop, a very lovely part of the ceremony is right at the beginning when they lead, Cardinal Dolan will lead me to my new chair. That's the symbol of the bishop's authority. And the next thing that happens is, I think, 15 or so, or maybe more, representatives of the general community will come up and greet me, and I'll greet them. And there are several people from other religious traditions there. The Jewish tradition, the Sikh leader, sadly, I just wrote him a letter to express our condolences on what that terrible thing in Wisconsin. The Episcopal bishop will be there. I'm an ecumenical guy. My grandfather on my mother's side was a lifelong Swedish Lutheran. So I got a little Lutheran blood in me, and I enjoy all of that work. When I was in Boston, when I was chaplain at Harvard, I also had another role. I was the liaison between the Archdiocese of Boston and the Jewish community of Greater Boston. I had rabbis at my Episcopal ordination, my buddies. So I really look forward to that. And I'm glad there'll be more of that here in this area than I had in Maine. Maine does not have the diversity that Western New York has, so I'm happy to be here.
Yet Maine shares some of the problems that we have.
And economically especially.
It stretches from city to rural areas.
Yes.
What do you see as some of those similar problems that you've had some background in addressing?
Well, certainly the general economic stresses in a state like Maine, and as I'm learning also around here, unemployment and all that goes with that, industries that were once flourishing, that when I was first here for my the news conference back in May, they were driving me along the lake. I almost said along the ocean. We had to shift here. Along the lake, and I could see all those old grain elevators that are symbolic of another era. And of course the steel mills were, and the same in Maine. We had all kinds of paper mills. There still are some there because Maine's 90% forest. Forestry's still good. But the paper mills are always on the edge. They'll close, they'll try to reopen. So that's just an example. So I understand that we're really trying here in Buffalo to recover and become stronger as a city, as a community. And I think there are some encouraging signs. Again, I'm so early. But what I see going on with healthcare, with the medical, I don't want to call it the medical industry, but all of that.
Medical corridor
the medical corridors, that's very impressive. We've got a strong educational component to our area, but I think it's manufacturing and industries and things like, same stuff we faced in Maine, just with different industries. No steel mills in Maine, paper mills.
Well, on that optimistic note for the future, just want to wish you all the best in your new work here in Buffalo.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're well. Thank you. Thank you very much. Happy to do it.
Thanks.